Not a Word by Rambling Writer. 1. Never hit the same house twice. 2. One room only. 3. No more than 5 minutes. 4. Run if you think you've been spotted, no matter what. 5. Leave empty-hoofed if you can't find anything. Those are the rules of burglary, as far as warded lock is concerned. She follows them religiously. They're good rules. They've served her well. She's made a lot of money following those rules. She hasn't been caught yet. But one wealth redistribution excursion yields a mere pittance in stolen loot. Locke knows there's more valuables deeper in the house, where her rules say she's not supposed to go. She could get to them, if only she was willing to bend those rules. So she does, and goes deeper into the house than she ought. Then Locke stumbles on a horrifying secret. The job is instantly derailed, and everything goes straight to Tartarus. Chapter 1. Second Incursion. The tips of the intruder spikes on top of the steel fence glinted pointily in the evening light. Warded Locke wasn't sure how exactly something could do anything pointily, but there it was. You saw the shine and immediately cringed and thought, "Yep, that's pointy." They glinted so pointily that it was almost enough to make her reconsider her course of action. Almost. She adjusted her hind leg's position on the top of the lamppost and glanced around one last time. The street was still empty. Of course it would be. It was dinner time on Snootington Lane. She stared back at the spikes, which almost seemed to be taunting her. Their tops were about level with her and 20 feet away. 20 feet ought to be good enough to keep ground-bound ponies from jumping over the fence from the tops of lampposts. But Locke had some tricks up her sleeve. Keeping her front legs spread for balance, she wiggled her rear hooves around to get as not bad a position as she could, tensed, and leaped. Locke's trick wasn't much, to be honest, but it was often overlooked. Every pony knew Earth ponies were strong and could pull stuff and knock stuff down, but every pony seemed to forget that jumping also involved strength. If a pony could casually pull a house, what was stopping them from channeling that energy into a leap and jumping across streets or up to the 4th story of a building? Of course, most Earth ponies didn't need to jump and didn't know the proper technique, not to mention it simply looked dorky, so that skill was usually overlooked. Except in ponies like Locke. Locke pulled up her legs as she soared over the spikes, but she needn't have bothered. She still had a good foot of clearance. She landed in the mansion's grounds cleanly, rolled to quiet the sound of her impact, and scurried into a bush. 25 feet from a standing position on 2 legs in terribly subpar conditions, not counting the extra distance she'd gotten as she fell. Very nice indeed. Locke bolted across unnecessarily hoof-cured lawn in spurts, flitting from ruler-trimmed bush to ruler-trimmed bush across shadows, never staying out in the open any longer than she absolutely had to. Logically, it was unnecessary. The street was deserted and all the residents and servants ought to be occupied with dinner, but being careful never hurt any pony. Soon, she was right up against the wall of the mansion. She craned her head. 4 stories. Ledges ran along the walls at each story, level with the bottom of each windowsill, when there actually were windows, at least. Locke picked floor number 3, as jewelry was usually higher up, in bedrooms, and floor number 4 was too high for most rich ponies' bedrooms. Hypothetically, it could have been floor number 2, but this section of wall didn't have any second-story windows. Locke didn't get the point of jewelry, or hoarding money in general beyond the usual rainy day funds. Really, what was the point of money if it was just going to sparkle on the end of a chain, or sit in a vault, or be reduced to a number on a financial table? If the wealthy weren't going to do anything with their wealth, then she would. She didn't think of herself as a kleptomaniac. She just wanted to be like a modern Robin Hood, stealing from the rich to give to the poor. She had the first part down pat, at least. And if she considered herself poor... Don't lie to yourself. That last job brought in over 30,000 bits. One robbery got you over 1 million. And that's even with you only receiving 10% of the jewelry's value, remember. And your job as a locksmith is doing just fine. Stupid conscience, interrupting her reminiscing like that. It didn't even have the decency to be always there and convince her to get out of this life altogether. Then again, Locke wasn't sure she knew how to do much else. And she wasn't sure she wanted to either, particularly with how much money she was making. So, floor number 3. Locke crouched, wiggled her rump, she imagined that action made her look like a cat, and leapt. She cleared the second-story ledge easily, hooking her hooves around it as she passed, and pulling hard to give herself a little extra oomph. She landed awkwardly on the third ledge, and her hooves scrabbled a little on the stone as she wrestled for balance, but she soon had herself plastered as flatly as possible against the wall. With the ledge only 4 inches wide, she'd need it. She slowly sidled down the ledge, heading for the nearest window. She reached it, tugged at it. Locked. This high up. Oh well. She examined it as best she could from her position. It looked like a simple Mortice lock, probably even a sash lock. Of course, that was all that was needed physically. There were undoubtedly spells on the lock to prevent magical tampering, and some kind of flight interdiction enchantment to prevent Pegasi from hovering smoothly enough to pick it. After all that, what kind of thief would try to manipulate the lock while standing on a 4-inch wide ledge? Locke rummaged through her bags to pull out a knife. The blade was too thin for stabbing, and Locke didn't like violence anyway. Keeping as still as possible so she wouldn't fall off, she wiggled the knife into the gap between the two halves of the window, and pushed. Sometimes, Locke wondered if there were such things as secondary talents that came with regular special talents. Side effects that proceeded logically from special talents without being covered by cutie marks. Her own cutie mark was a traditional image of a lock, as her special talent was understanding the mechanics of and building locks. However, while she was almost unparalleled at making locks, her instinctual knowledge of them meant she was also quite good at picking them. She could look at any lock, understand the insides almost instantly, and know the best way to pick it in another second. She'd once bragged to a friend that she could pick a tumbler lock with a feather. Compared to that, a sash lock was so trivial she wasn't even thinking. The blade hit the bolt, slowed, then jumped forward as it flicked the sash open. Locke smirked as she bestowed her knife, then pushed the window open and rolled in. She gave herself 5 minutes before she left, no matter what she found. A personal library, and one of those big, old-money, 2-story ones at that, with movable ladders and everything. It even had oil lamps for that last bit of pointless atmosphere. But valuables-wise, nothing but books and some golden busts. Joy. This wasn't going to be a good job. T-minus 4 minutes, 57 seconds. Locke was on a reading area on the 2nd floor. Of the library, not the mansion. She ran to the railing, vaulted over, and landed more softly than a leaf. She looked around, taking in the rows of bookcases, the decorations, and the crackling fire that seemed obligatory. Well, the good thing about lackluster places to break in was that they didn't take long to case the joint. T-minus 4 minutes, 51 seconds. Locke had a sort of sixth sense for shiny things, almost. She had hunches about where valuable objects might be kept, and those hunches tended to be correct. It could have been her special talent, except that her special talent involved locks. Whatever the case, she was around the room very quickly, grabbing a golden candlestick here, a platinum medal there, a small chestnut box that may or may not have held something, and so forth, stuffing them into her bags. A disappointing haul, altogether, but she couldn't have everything. Maybe she could have gone further in, but one of her rules was to stick to one room, and one room only. Back out the window and into the Canterlot night she was going. T-minus 4 minutes, 12 seconds. She clambered up the bookcase in a way that'd make a monkey jealous, went to the window, pushed it open, and stopped. T-minus 4 minutes, 8 seconds. She looked at the floor beneath her hooves. Supposedly, this open space was just a place for rich stuck-ups to pretend to read whatever stuffy tome they had chosen, but it wasn't over anything. Bookcases extended down from the lower edges of the balcony all around, and there hadn't been any windows on the outside. There was a large hole of unused space underneath the floor that possibly held stuff. Very valuable stuff. T-minus 4 minutes, 6 seconds. Stereotypically, libraries held secret passages. Who was to say there wasn't a secret room below? Her shiny sense was tingling, and she still had time, right? T-minus 4 minutes, 2 seconds. Right. Back over the railing, and Locke was on the floor, examining the bookcases. T-minus 3 minutes, 55 seconds. It took her a while of close examination, but she found it. A cluster of books suspiciously close together. She tugged on one. They all rotated on a pivot. Click! And an adjacent bookcase moved an inch forward. Locke poked at one of the books on the door. They were real books, but a spell was keeping them in place now that the door was open. She delicately tugged at the door, and was rewarded with the wonderful sound of no squeaks. She slipped inside. T-minus 1 minute, 34 seconds. The room was nearly pitch black inside. Locke pulled an unfocused light gem from her bag and rattled it to excite its internal magic. It flared to life, revealing nothing more than a tiny cramped room in the corner of the library that had been hidden away. At first, Locke was disappointed, but then she took a closer look at the books. They were old, with strange binding materials and grisly covers and titles like Ars Tenebrae. Books on dark magic, secreted away from the authorities. Well, all the better that Locke was stealing from these ponies then. Very bad things would happen to her if she got caught, but she wasn't planning on getting caught. T-minus 1 minute, 25 seconds. Her shiny sense was still digging into her skull. More than before, actually. It had stopped poking her and started jabbing her. But when she held the gem aloft and looked around the tiny room, she couldn't see anything. Just books, books, and books. And a dark passage extending from the corner. Locke's shiny sense started screaming. T-minus 1 minute, 19 seconds. But she didn't head for it. Besides going into another room, her time was running out. She needed to leave this place as soon as possible. Still, Locke pulled out the platinum medal and stared at it. This was, in all likelihood, the most expensive thing she'd take away tonight, and it was still rather pathetic. T-minus 1 minute, 14 seconds. Decisions, decisions. T-minus 1 minute, 7 seconds. Although, why not return? She knew where she'd found everything. She could put it back. These guys would never know they'd been burgled. She could come back tomorrow and... No, you're pushing it. It's against the rules. You've got enough. Leave it be. Locke willed her conscience to shut up. Yes, she'd come back tomorrow. She needed a better haul, she told herself. This wasn't enough, she said. She zipped back through the library, depositing every nicked object back exactly where she'd found it. T-minus 48 seconds. She had 43 seconds left when she was out the window, closing it behind her. A pity she couldn't relock it. Hopefully, it'd go unnoticed. Why do you think never hit the same house twice is one of your rules? Locke dropped from the 3rd story straight to the ground. A quick survey, there was no pony around, and Locke scrambled to a pre-selected tree on the lawn. Climb, jump, over the fence. Easy. Locke strode off into the Canterlot night, shivering with anticipation. Tomorrow was gonna be good. Breaking one, just one, of her rules couldn't hurt. Not for one night. Locke's route was unchanged from the day before. She entered the mansion exactly as she previously had, snatched up the decorations again, and opened the secret door. Easy peasy. T-minus 4 minutes, 28 seconds. She set off down the passage in the corridor, a focused light gem shining a beam before her. It was narrow, but not claustrophobically so she still had a few good inches on either side of her. Light gems dotted the ceiling, but weren't lit up, and Locke assumed she'd missed their on switch. Far from being dusty and cobwebby, the passage felt well traversed, if dark and narrow and possibly a little drafty. If she'd been more alert, Locke probably would have been worried about a corridor to a secret library of black magic being commonly used, but her shiny sense was almost deafening. T-minus 4 minutes, 16 seconds. The passage ran straight for, Locke guessed, a few dozen yards, before opening out onto another room, some kind of small storeroom with another door on the other side. When she saw what was on the shelves, the word that immediately leaped into her head was paraphernalia. Rituals required junk to function, and this place had a lot of junk. Crow feathers, certain types of wood, knives, pieces of clouds, eye of newt, flasks of blood, rainbows, colors, the whole shebang. It was stacked to the ceiling, clustered tightly on the shelves that ran all around the wall. If you named it, it was probably in here somewhere, legal or not. T-minus 3 minutes, 59 seconds. But what was there in particular abundance because of their magical properties? Gems. Set in rings, necklaces, brooches, not set in anything, some even uncut. Her instincts had been 100% right. She'd have to tell her fence, Gannett, to get it all checked for curses, which meant her fee would take a hit, but there was still easily more than 10 times what she'd get from the items in the library. Locke skimmed the room, planning out her best route. T-minus 3 minutes, 56 seconds. Her first target was an especially large ruby on a stand. A fire ruby, if she wasn't mistaken. 500,000 bits, right there, bare minimum. Locke tentatively touched it and waited. No alarms sounded. Locke tentatively lifted it off its cushion and waited. No alarms sounded. Locke nodded to herself and stuffed it in her bag. Every now and then she ran into particularly valuable jewelry that had warning spells on it to alert Nopony when it was touched or moved. Very rarely, but just often enough to make her cautious when she spotted something this expensive. T-minus 3 minutes, 41 seconds. She tested the next few jewels as well, but when no klaxons started blaring, she got less nervous. She was so thorough she might as well have gone over the place with a fine-tooth comb. She went over the room from top to bottom, nudging aside the ritual items on the shelves to poke behind them, and, just in case, Locke went over everything twice. She had the time. T-minus 2 minutes, 28 seconds. By the time she was convinced she'd found everything worth finding, Locke was very satisfied. At least 1, probably 2 million bits worth in jewels and jewelry. True, she'd end up with less than 10% of that once she sold it to her fence, but that was normal. Definitely worth breaking a single rule. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds. She was about to leave when she heard something from behind the door leading out. A sort of muffled, panicked scream, quiet enough that she almost missed it. It was enough to give her pause as her mind ran away from her. These guys had a secret library of black magic. Who's to say they weren't serious about it? And considering how much black magic seemed to involve equine sacrifice... T-minus 1 minute, 33 seconds. Locke chewed her lip as she stared at the door. Another scream, quieter still. She had everything she came for. But leaving some pony stranded there, if there was some pony, was just wrong. But her 5 minutes was almost up, and it was against the rule. If you still cared that much about your rules, you'd have taken yesterday's weak loot and left it at that. 1 minute 30 seconds, by the way. Stupid, stupid, stupid conscience! It seemed to shift based on what she knew. Yesterday was different! Locke stepped to the door, ready to blow the joint, but still stopped and looked back at the door. Silence. If you're going to go, go. If you're going to break your rules and look. Don't waste time. Deciding not to lie to herself anymore, Locke trotted to the door. There was a minuscule peephole there. Locke wasn't surprised. If the room on the other side of the passage was a secret black magic library, then this room was probably a secret black magic repository, hidden from the outside by a secret door. And it wouldn't do to walk in on Snoopy guards ponies without checking to see that there was no pony outside the secret door. Locke peeped. A plain room was on the other side, the walls decorated with plain hangings, but that wasn't why she almost felt her heart stop. In the cold blue of several light gems, a thin unicorn was lying spread-eagled on a marble table, a nullifier ring over her horn and a collar around her neck. She wasn't secured by any means Locke could see, but although she writhed, her legs barely moved. Locke fell away from the door, her mind racing a mile a minute. Some ritual. The specifics didn't matter. Anything with equine sacrifice was bad news. Already, she was coming up with something resembling a plan. She'd leave, hide her loot, and alert the royal guard. They'd storm the place and rescue the pony. She'd have to answer a few awkward questions about what, exactly, she was doing in the house. But compared to kidnapping and attempted equine sacrifice, mere breaking and entering would get overlooked. She's on the makeshift altar already. By the time the guard gets here, it might be too late. It wouldn't be. What if it is? Definitely. Probably. What if it is? Locke held back a groan. There was a reason she was a burglar and not a mugger, besides the money being better. After another look through the peephole to make sure there wasn't any other ponies in the room, Locke flicked open the lock on the door and entered. Hearing the noise, the unicorn snapped to look at the door, her eyes wide with fear. But once she failed to recognize Locke, her expression turned to confusion. She made a puzzled sort of grunt as Locke walked up. "Listen," Locke said. I'm gonna try to get you out of here, okay?" She didn't sound very convincing, but what else was there to say? The unicorn blinked, then nodded vigorously for several seconds. First things first. Get the unicorn moving again. Up close, Locke could see weird scabbed shapes traced into the unicorn's skin, on her coat, on her legs. Runes. That could keep her paralyzed. Probably. Literally the only thing Locke knew about runes was that the shape mattered. Destroy the shape, destroy the rune's effect. Locke drew her knife out and laid the point on the unicorn's cheek. She whispered into the pony's ear, "Sorry." Then, as shallowly as she could, she sliced through rune and skin alike. She was halfway across when the unicorn's mouth snapped open, and she yanked her knife away. The unicorn almost yelped. Locke could hear the beginnings of a scream, but clamped her mouth shut again, biting into her lip hard enough to draw blood. The unicorn whimpered quietly. Trembling, Locke found another rune on one of the unicorn's legs. She delicately sliced through it the same way, and the unicorn could move her leg freely. A few more seconds, and the unicorn was shaking on the table, but at least she was free enough to shake. "Hey," whispered Locke, laying a hoof on her. "Are you okay?" The unicorn blinked back tears and curled into a fetal position. "No," she mumbled, hiding her head between her front legs. "I'm not okay. I... She sucked in a shuddering breath. "I've been here for, I don't know, days. They just put me on there an hour ago. It's Whimpering, she pressed a hoof to the bleeding patch of skin on her cheek that had once been a rune. I don't... Locke seized on what little bedside manner she had. Listen, I'm getting you out of here. Can you stand? I don't know, mumbled the unicorn. Let me... She flexed her legs, one at a time. Both ponies cringed at the pops in the joints. She rolled off the table and landed, trembling, on all four hooves. Her knees were almost knocking together as she stood upright. But she was still standing upright. She took a few steps, and contrary to Locke's expectations, she didn't collapse. I think so, yeah, she said, but don't ask me to run. And just like that, Locke's initial plan, they both climb a tree and jump over the fence, was shot. She had a plan B, but it was so hopeless she'd barely considered it. Steal the key to the front gate and stroll out. Where was she supposed to find the key in a house this big? She didn't have much faith in her ability to pick the gate. A lot of locks of that type nowadays had enchantments that would literally eat fake keys and lockpicks if triggered. And she didn't have a plan C. There were no other options for plan C. Although, technically, maybe there was. Hide the unicorn, then go back to her leave, hide, plunder, alert guards plan. But that was still iffy. It relied on the inhabitants of the house not coming back, finding the unicorn gone, and searching the house in the time being. Locke didn't know the layout of the house, and she doubted the unicorn did either, but the owners probably knew every nook and cranny. Still, it was an option. Plan D, then, if Plan B fell through, and she thought of something better for Plan C. The unicorn flexed her legs, trying to get the blood flowing. They were still shaky, but slightly less so. So, what are you doing in here? What the heck? Locke had never been good at lying. Burgling. The unicorn stared. Burgling? She said slowly. You mean... stealing? Yes, snapped Locke. Burgling, stealing, robbery, theft, purloining, wealth redistribution, heisting, pinching, appropriating, moonlight requisition, heaving, pillaging, whatever you want to call it. And if you're gonna judge me on it, you can... You wouldn't leave her here, and you know it. Just shut up, okay? I'm rescuing you. Pinching her mouth shut, the unicorn nodded. Now put your head down. Locke quickly worked the nullifier ring off the unicorn's horn. It was one of the more common models that required a physical key rather than the right enchantment to open. Granted, the lock was a complex one, but it was still a physical lock. It put up about as much resistance before Locke's picks as a sheet of parchment. Tossing the ring aside, Locke thought where to put the unicorn during her incursion. If she left her here, the inhabitants of the house would find her free immediately the second that they got back to do something unspeakable to her. Locke poked her head back into the ritual storage room for a second. Now, listen. You take the passage in here to the end and stay there. The unicorn's eyes widened and she started to protest. Stay there. I'm going to look for the key to the outer gate. That might be the only way out. When I find it, I'll come back and get you. Locke knew someplace that this close by to the ritual chamber was a bad hiding spot, but she had no idea of the other rooms nearby. Why can't I go with you? The unicorn shivered. Why do I have to wait here? How sneaky are you? No response. That's what I thought. Stay here. I promise I'll be back. The door to the rest of the house was locked. After a few seconds' examination, Locke guessed it was a lever tumbler lock. Time for a curtain pick. She strapped the pick around her hoof and held a torsion wrench between her teeth. Inserting both into the keyhole, she wiggled the wrench around until she could feel it resting in the groove of the latch. She twisted the wrench at the same time as she swept the pick over the levers, and the door opened like a dream. After making one last "stay here" motion to the unicorn, Locke cautiously looked outside. No pony to the right or to the left. They were supposed to be at dinner. It was why she always broke into houses at this time, but there was always a chance that some pony could be wandering around. Why do you think you're supposed to limit yourself to one room? The white-walled hallway stretched off to her left. To her right, it quickly took a sharp turn as it hit the boundary of the library. Locke had no idea where she was going, so she chose right. "Remember," she whispered to the unicorn, "I'll be back." Without waiting for a response, she stepped into the hall and shut the door as quietly as she could. So, I do not know much about lockpicking. I understood what they were describing with the lock on the window, I think. It's one of those locks that's just a hook that you swing over. It doesn't even take a key, you just have to be on the right side of the door to swing it. And yeah, as long as you have something skinny, you can unpick one of those real easy if there's a hole between the two pieces. Not like one of those that you get in a hotel room with the little chain. Those are almost impossible to open from the outside. They require you to cut the chain open. Or, like, some really fine detail work. Downside being that there's no key, you can't lock that and then leave. Anyway, I wonder if Snootington Lane is the actual name, or if that's just her being herself and, you know, constantly making fun of rich people. I could see it going either way. I mean, this is Equestria. I could see them naming a place Snootington Lane. I don't know. Yeah, I'm feeling just a tad bit under the weather. Ugh. I don't know if it's the plants or the dust, but I'm pretty sure it's not a sickness in the traditional sense. It's just, I have trouble breathing sometimes. Lots of coughing, lots of sneezing. Hopefully the audio quality on this came out okay anyway. I also found it amusing when she mentioned that she thought crouching and wiggling made her look like a cat. I wonder if that's a thing that helps her jump, that she thinks makes her look like a cat, or if that's a thing she does just to make it look like a cat because she finds it amusing. I don't know. Silly. Seriously. Too much hiccups. Overall, I like Warded Locke. She's definitely not a law-abiding citizen, but she doesn't seem to be a bad person. I like her. We have slightly different opinions on some things, but you know, she seems nice. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, everyone. Goodbye.